This video contains descriptions of real historical events, including violence and disturbing subject matter. All content is presented for educational purposes based on verified public records. Viewer discretion is advised. In 1978, 5 young men drove home from a basketball game in Northern California and never arrived. Their car was found abandoned in the mountains, far from any road they had reason to take, undamaged, with fuel still in the tank. They had simply left it and walked off into the freezing forest, at night, in winter. 4 of them were found dead in the months that followed. The 5th has never been found. So why did the Yuba County Five abandon a working car and walk into the snow? The 5 men were Ted Waher, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt, and Gary Mathias. They ranged in age from their 20s to their early 30s, and they were close friends from the Yuba City and Marysville area of Northern California. 4 of the men had intellectual disabilities. The 5th, Gary Mathias, lived with a serious mental illness that was managed with medication. They were part of a community program, and together they formed a small, devoted basketball team. They were gentle, reliable men who lived by routine and who were known to follow rules carefully and to dislike anything that disrupted their habits. This detail matters more than almost any other in the case. These were not risk-takers. They were men who, by the account of everyone who knew them, would never willingly do something dangerous, strange, or against the rules. They valued being home on time. They would not, under any normal circumstances, drive into the mountains at night in winter. On the evening of the 24th of February, 1978, the 5 men drove to a college basketball game in the city of Chico. They were excited. Their own team had a tournament the next morning, and they had agreed they needed to be back in good time to prepare for it. They watched the game, bought snacks from a convenience store on the way out, and got back into Jack Madruga's car for the drive home. The route home was simple and familiar, and led south and west, back toward their own town. Instead, the car went east, up, into the mountains, into the Plumas National Forest, into the snow. And no one has ever been able to explain why. When the 5 men did not come home that night, their families knew immediately that something was wrong. These were not men who stayed out. They did not break routine. By the next day, the families had reported them missing and a search had begun. 4 days later, the car was found. It was Jack Madruga's car, and it was sitting on a remote mountain road in the Plumas National Forest, roughly 50 miles east of the route the men should have taken home. It was high in the mountains, in deep snow country, in the middle of winter. 4 days later, the car was found. It was Jack Madruga's car, and it was sitting on a remote mountain road in the Plumas National Forest, roughly 50 miles east of the route the men should have taken home. It was high in the mountains, in deep snow country, in the middle of winter. And the car was fine. It was not crashed. It was not stuck, beyond an easy push. It was parked, more or less neatly, on the side of the road. It had about a quarter tank of fuel, enough to have driven much further. It started when investigators tried it. There was no mechanical reason, none at all, for the men to have left that car. Inside, the men's belongings remained. Maps were left behind. Some of the snacks they had bought were still in the car. The doors were closed. There was no sign of a struggle, no blood, no damage, nothing to suggest violence had happened inside or around the vehicle. The 5 men had, for reasons no one understands, gotten out of a working car in deep snow, at night, in freezing temperatures, and walked away from it on foot. The search of the surrounding wilderness was massive, But the weather was savage, and the terrain was brutal. Snow fell. The searchers found nothing. Weeks passed. Then months. The spring began to melt the high snow. And in June, nearly 4 months after the men vanished, the forest began to give them back. About 19 miles from the car, deep in the forest, there was a series of buildings used by the Forest Service, including a trailer kept stocked for anyone stranded in the mountains. Inside that trailer, searchers found the body of Ted Weher. He had made it there. 19 miles, on foot, through the snow. And what the trailer revealed only deepened the mystery. Ted Weher had died of starvation and exposure. He had survived for an extended period inside that trailer, possibly weeks. He had lost a great deal of weight. His feet were severely frostbitten. But here is the impossible part. The trailer contained food, enough canned food to have sustained him for far longer than he survived. Much of it was never opened. The trailer had heating fuel he appears not to have used. It had matches. There were warm clothes nearby. A man who had walked 19 miles through snow to reach shelter then died of starvation and cold inside a shelter stocked with food and the means to stay warm. There were further strange details. Someone had lit candles in the trailer and burned them down. Weher's body had been covered, carefully, with sheets, suggesting someone else had been there with him, at least for a time, and had tended to him. But that person was gone. In the area around the trailer, over the following days, the remains of 3 more of the men were found. Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling had died of exposure, their bodies found along the route between the car and the trailer. Jack Hewitt was found nearby. 4 of the 5 were now accounted for. But the 5th man, Gary Mathias, the one whose footprints and decisions might explain everything, was not among them. Gary Mathias was never found. Searchers combed the area around the trailer for years. Shoes believed to be his were recovered, but his body, despite extensive searching, was never recovered, and to this day, his fate is unknown. The central question of the case is the simplest one, and the one with no good answer. Why did they leave the car? There is no evidence of another vehicle forcing them off the road. There is no evidence of a kidnapping. The men were not drinkers, and there was no sign of intoxication. The most widely accepted theory is that something frightened them. That they came up that mountain road, perhaps confused, or mistakenly believing they were taking a shortcut, became stuck or alarmed, and in a state of fear and confusion, abandoned the car and tried to walk to safety, in exactly the wrong direction, deeper into the wilderness. But every version of that theory runs into the same wall. Men who valued routine and safety above all else do not drive 50 miles in the wrong direction into a snowbound mountain range at night without a powerful reason. And whatever that reason was, it was strong enough to make them leave a warm, working car with food inside and walk into a frozen forest where 4 of them would die. Fear can do that. But fear of what? On an empty mountain road, in the dark, with no one else known to be there? This is why the case is so often called the American Dyatlov Pass. Like that case, it features a group of capable people fleeing safety into deadly cold, leaving behind warmth and shelter, as though something they could not name had made the freezing wilderness feel safer than where they were. And like Dyatlov, the more closely you examine the evidence, the less any single ordinary explanation seems to hold all of it at once. The Yuba County Five were, by every account, kind and harmless men who simply wanted to get home in time for a basketball game. Instead, something turned an ordinary winter night into a journey up a dark mountain, into a forest that kept 4 of them and swallowed the 5th completely. Nearly 50 years later, the case remains open and unexplained. What happened on that road exists now only in the few hard facts the forest gave back. A working car, abandoned for no reason. A man who walked 19 miles to shelter and starved inside it. And one set of footprints that walked out into the trees and never came back. 5 men drove home from a basketball game and turned, for no reason anyone can find, up into the mountains. They left a working car in the snow and walked into the dark forest. One of them reached a shelter full of food and died there anyway, his body covered with care by someone who then vanished. 4 were found. The 5th man walked into the trees on a winter night in 1978, and the forest has never given him back. If you want to go deeper, the story of the Dyatlov Pass is waiting for you.